come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
It is a pleasure to be with you. I thank you for your good service to our good land. And I share your grief with Pastor Gary Kubley, a friend. Let us pray. Almighty God, you have given us this good land as our heritage. Bless our land with honesty in the workplace, truth in education, and honor in daily life. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion. When times are prosperous, let our hearts be thankful, and in troubled times, do not let our trust in you fail. You show us the splendor of diversity and the beauty of unity in your own divine life. Make us who came from many nations with many languages a united people that delights in many different gifts. Defend our liberties and give those whom we have entrusted with authority the spirit of wisdom, that there may be justice and peace in our land. May those who hold power understand that it is a trust from you. We lift before you all who govern this wonderful state. Bless judges and courts, juries, and law officers throughout our land. Give them the spirit of wisdom that they may perceive the truth and administer the law impartially. We commend to you your gracious care and keeping of all the men and women of our armed forces at home and abroad. Defend them day by day with your heavenly grace. Strengthen them in their trials. Give them courage to face the perils that surround them, and grant them a dear sense of your abiding presence. We ask all this in your almighty name. Amen.
Members, our guest chaplain for today is Reverend Craig Hansen from the Roseville Lutheran Church in Roseville, Minnesota. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal for the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 87th session, 2012, 81st day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Monday, March 5th, 2012.
If there are no objections, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will stand as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objections, the journal stands as corrected by the chief clerk. Reports of standing committees and divisions. Copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there are no objections, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objections, the reports... Hearing no objections, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading House File 1416.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 2500.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 2553.
Second reading. Introduction and first reading of House files. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will read these House files and report these House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House Files 2743 through 2758.
First reading, House File 2743 through 2758. Calendar for the day.
Mr. Speaker.
Call the member for Scott, Representative Biskins. For what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Mason, Section 221, I ask for a privilege of the House.
Representative Biskins has requested privilege of the House. State your privilege of the House, Representative Biskins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House of Representatives, as I'm sure most of you are aware, Section 221 of Mason's, which allows members of the House of Representatives to call for a privilege of the House, has a number of components to them. And one of the components to a privilege of the House that we share as members of this sacred body is that we are able to call to question the conduct of reporters or the press or the accuracy of published reports. Mr. Speaker, members, I'm not here to call to question any accuracy of published media reports, but I am here to call to question the conduct of the media in the state of Minnesota. Members, my friend from Hennepin County via Minneapolis, I don't know if you know this, but just last week, Representative Montgomery, you and I were rock stars in the media. I counted no less than 7 published reports, both in print and in video, that showed our little disagreement here on the House floor. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We're here to have disagreements. But members, what I think we need to keep in mind, and we as elected leaders of the state of Minnesota, is that we have a responsibility to keep the media honest and call them into question when certain actions or inactions of the media are to occur. Earlier this week, members, we had a press conference called by a bipartisan committee to talk about some good things that were happening between Democrats and Republicans here in the House of Representatives. And if I may, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask in bipartisan fashion if Representative Dietrich would yield to a question.
She will yield. Representative Biskins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, you were one of the 2 members of this sacred body that called this press conference to announce some good things that were occurring. Could you tell the body and the press who is sitting here why you called that press conference and what occurred?
The member from Hennepin, Representative Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Biskins. And just on a side note first, Representative Biskins, I have served with you for 8 years in the House of Representatives, and I don't think that there has ever been a day when we have been in more agreement than today. Yes, we called a press conference on behalf of the Small Business Caucus here in the House of Representatives, and it was the result of work that we started in 2008. And to my knowledge, the House of Representatives has never had a bipartisan Small Business Caucus in the House before. So this was groundbreaking work that we started in 2008. And we continued our work in 2010 with the help of Representative Downey and I would say about 20 to 25 members, Republicans and Democrats. We met at least once a week the whole month of January. We listened to bills, we listened to small business leaders, we took input, and what we did was then we suggested pieces of legislation that we could all agree on, and then we got behind about 11 bills this legislative session. And we thought that this was newsworthy enough to call a press conference, that the press would be very anxious to hear about how a group of bipartisan legislators were working together to help strengthen the small business economy in the state of Minnesota. And lo and behold, when we got into the room, there was no press there. It was really disappointing. I think, well, first of all, Representative Biskins, just let me tell you a few things, or ask you, did you know that in the state of Minnesota there are over 478,000 small businesses? And I just have a couple more questions, and I'll let you answer all three together. And Representative Biskins, did you know that the small businesses in Minnesota employ 49.9% of the private sector workforce? And from 2005 to 2008, small businesses accounted for 46% of the new net private sector jobs in the state of Minnesota. Now, I think that the work that the Small Business Caucus did on behalf of these job creators is newsworthy. And you know what, Representative Biskins? I think that every small business owner in this state ought to be offended by this. So thank you for bringing this to the attention of the body and the state.
The member from Scott, Representative Biskins.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative, no, I didn't know those facts because no media entity bothered to cover them. What a shame. Members of this body, and I state this very, very seriously, very, very sincerely, we are going to be heading out of this place in the next few months, and we are going to start campaigning. We are going to be talking about philosophical differences that we share, and philosophical differences that we have with our opponents. And that's good and proper. That's what makes this country great. But you know, I've campaigned now for 14 years, and one of the things I always get from my constituents is, can't you folks ever get along? Can't you folks ever agree on anything? How embarrassing is it for us as citizens of the state of Minnesota because you legislators can't get along? And members of this body, part of the blame for the perception of the public lies with the reporting of the state media. In a democracy, they have a moral duty and a moral obligation, and they are failing in that. They are looking to sell ads and to sell press, and what sells it? It is the discourse. It is not the unity. And they are painting a negative picture of what really and truly happens here. And we can't sit down and allow it to occur. We need to call them out as they find it very easy to call us out. When there is an opportunity for us to work together, we work together, members. How many bills have passed into law just this biennium? When you have a Democrat government and a Republican-controlled legislature, that does not happen without cooperation. But you don't hear that they cooperated in the media. What you hear is how they fight and bicker and hate each other. Representative Marquardt, you're my buddy. I don't hate you, and I know you don't hate me. We get along, despite what the media tries to portray. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to call this privilege of the House. I ask every member of this body to stay aware of these things, and let's do our obligation in holding the press accountable as they must hold us accountable. Thank you.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar today is House File 2152. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 2152, number 4 on the calendar for today, an act relating to commerce.
Call the member from Candy, Ohio, Representative Vogel, to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House File 2152 is a bill that has a purpose of leveling the playing field for real estate agents who may happen to own rental property. And current statute says that any funds and things that the agent has would need to run through the agent's broker. And what we are trying to do here, this legislation, is to simply make it an even course for the real estate agent to be able to be like all the other real estate owners out there who have rental property, that they can just take in those rents and not have to run all of those funds through their broker. That's about it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 2152.
Third reading. Discussion of the bill. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as title is agreed to. Next bill on the calendar today is House File 2455. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 2455, number 5 on the calendar for today, an act relating to the City of Montgomery.
Call the member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen, to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a specialty bill that applies to a particular city in my district, Montgomery. The Montgomery Lonsdale School expanded, and it expanded on land that had a veterans park on it. So the city would like to convey a new parcel of land below market value to the American Legion in order to rebuild and restore the Veterans Memorial. Appreciate your support on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 2455.
Third reading. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take... Oh, I'm sorry. Member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Gruenhagen yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Representative Gruenhagen, if you could just explain exactly what the current law is that you're trying to change and why we have that provision in law right now.
The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Yeah, most of the information I've received on this bill has come from the City of Montgomery, who's been working on this for quite some time. And according to the information they've given me, they need this provision in the law in order to be able to transfer a small parcel of city-owned property to the nonprofit American Legion Post for less than market value.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a great purpose to help the American Legion. I'm just wondering what in law today, it says notwithstanding any law to the contrary, what we have in law today that prevents the city from doing that. What are they trying to overcome or exception they're trying to get out of, and why was that law put in place in the first place?
Representative Gruenhagen will yield to the question. The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The city attorney looked at this and made this recommendation. I, not being attorney, believed the attorney and what his advice was from the city, so I took the appropriate steps. There's also a bill in the Senate carried by Senator Alda Kreif that would accomplish the same purpose.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed. The title is agreed to. Next bill on the calendar for today is House File 2376. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 2376, number 6 on the calendar for today, an act relating to education finance.
Call the member from Morrison, Representative LeMieur, to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, currently in statute, capital expenditures for the purchase of food service equipment must come from the general fund and not the food service fund unless two conditions apply. The surplus in the food service account must be greater than the equipment to be purchased, and it must get approval from the Department of Education. What House File 2376 does is it simplifies the process and allows the purchase of the food service equipment while removing the requirement from the Department of Education. It is supported by Minnesota Rural Education Association, Minnesota Association of School Businesses, Minnesota School Nutrition Association, and the Minnesota Department of Education. I appreciate your support.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 2376.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed. Its title is agreed to. Next bill on the calendar today is House File 2132. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 2132, number 7 on the calendar for today, the first engrossment, an act relating to Washington County Housing and Redevelopment Authority.
Call the member from Washington, Representative Lohmer, to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, House File 2132 is a local bill specific to Washington County. We have all of the Washington County delegation on board with this bill, including Representative Davids, and it's bipartisan with Representative Slawick, so we thank you for being part of this bill. So basically this bill passed on the House floor at the end of the 2011 session, but unfortunately the session ended before the Senate could act on it. Specifically, the bill provides that Washington County HRA has jurisdiction and may operate in all areas of the county, including within counties, whether or not they have their own HRAs. So I thank you so much for your support and ask for a green vote.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 2132.
Third reading. Discussion of the bill. The member from Dakota, Representative Slawick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to second with Representative Lohmer. This is an important bill for Washington County, and I hope everybody will give this a green vote. It takes a Washington County HRA that was originally created through special law in 1974 and under municipal housing statutes, and gives it the proper jurisdiction that it needs. Thank you.
And I apologize, Representative Slawick. Be Ramsey County. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed. Its title is agreed to. Next bill on the calendar today is House File 2392. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 2392, number 8 on the calendar for today, the first engrossment, an act relating to Anoka County.
I recognize the author of the bill, a member from Washington, Representative Dettmer, to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Again, it's a local bill similar to the Washington County bill. It provides Anoka County housing HRA authority and has jurisdiction and may operate in areas across the county, including within the cities, except those cities that have their own HRAs established in May 2011. Thank you.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 2392.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is passed. Its title is agreed to. Next bill on the calendar today is House File 2022. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 2022, number 9 on the calendar for today, an act relating to St. Louis County.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from St. Louis, Representative Dill, to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this bill is about St. Louis County selling some land to a nursing home operating group called Health Dimensions. The county had operated the nursing home Chris Jensen for a number of years and then turned around and leased the surface, buildings, etc., to Health Dimensions. Health Dimensions came in and they have done a wonderful job of managing the nursing home. It has saved the county millions of dollars in losses that they had incurred operating the nursing home, and have indicated that they would be willing to buy make investment in the property if they were able to buy the land that the buildings are on. And so the county has come to me. It's a very good project. It will do well and continue to do well. And the company, of course, doesn't want to invest significant resources, many millions, to upgrade the facility if they don't own the property. So that is the crux of the bill. There has been no objection to the bill when we went through government ops, and the bit came directly to the House floor onto the General Register. And I'll stand for questions.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 2022.
Third reading. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dill, will you yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dill, will this cause any private investment to happen?
The member from St. Louis, Representative Dill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Hillstrom and members. Yes, the nursing home company has indicated to the county, and it will be in an agreement that they make upon the sale of the property, that they will invest immediately $9 million into the property in improvements to the existing facilities, as well as an additional $12 to $14 million in new property improvements that will house assisted living, the entry level of living for our elder citizens prior to being assisted, as well as additional nursing home facilities. And that investment is anticipated to create approximately 75 additional full-time positions that will work at the nursing home. And this nursing home is located on Rice Lake Road in Duluth, on the north side of Duluth.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dill, I want to thank you for introducing a bill that actually will create jobs this session. As we know, jobs are very important to the Minnesota economy, and I encourage members to vote yes.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dill, how much land are we talking about in St. Louis County, in my district?
The member from St. Louis will yield. Representative Dill.
Thank you very much. And Representative Murphy, Mr. Speaker, and members, I had that number in committee, and as I recall, it is more than 2 and less than 5. The other advantage to the bill is that when the private group, Health Dimensions, purchases the land and then owns the building, that the entire property will be added back onto the tax rolls and have significant benefit because of the value of the improvements that they will make immediately and the value of the improvements that they will make in the coming years, and rather shortly, I might add, to the value of the property, and hence would increase the property value of the county and, in theory, drop the taxes on each individual homeowner appropriately.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Murphy M.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dill, will this land have any impact on the juvenile correction facility that is adjoining, or the Duluth St. Louis County Partnership in Public Safety building, which is adjoining? And I think there's one other building up there that is adjoining. Is this a compact little piece of land that's more than 2 and less than 5 acres?
The member from St. Louis, Representative Dill, will yield. Representative Dill.
Well, Mr. Speaker and Representative Murphy, now that I'm thinking about it, I believe it was a 22-acre parcel in total, and that the parcels that you are suggesting are around or near the current Chris Jensen nursing home site. And I believe that they would be complementary to those sites, but the investment that Health Dimensions will make is independent of and on the property that would be acquired under this bill.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Murphy M. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion of the bill, the clerk will take the roll on the bill.
We're really making progress there.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as title is agreed to. Next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1738. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File 1738, number 11 on the calendar, the first engrossment, an act relating to local government.
Call the member from Ramsey, Representative Slawick. For what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Mr. Speaker and members, on behalf of Representative Swedinsky, on behalf of Representative Hansen, I want to acknowledge the death of Gary DeCramer, who served in the State Senate for 3 terms. He was originally from Ghent, which is Representative Swedinsky's district, as well as a constituent of Representative Hansen's. Gary DeCramer served for those 3 terms in the State Senate. He also was the Minnesota Director of the USDA Rural Development and interim president of what is now the Southwest Minnesota State University in Marshall. He most of all, to me, worked at the University of Minnesota, the Humphrey School, and he was the advisor of their mid-career program. I was a student in the mid-career program, and he was one of the best professors I've ever had. I know there's other students here. Representative Davney also worked with Gary DeCramer, as maybe some of the rest of you have. He was our advisor, he was our mentor, he was our friend, and he helped us all as we worked in our mid-careers to get our masters. And for me, members, what that meant to me was I was allowed to teach because I've got my master's through the Humphrey School. So members, I would ask for a moment of silence in remembrance of Gary DeCramer.
Members, please rise for a moment of silence, the passing of our colleague. Thank you, Representative Slawick. Calling the member from Cass, Representative Howes, to present your bill.
Mr. Speaker, before I start, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
On the bill that I have in my hand, which is the bill, and I don't have the green jacket, the author says, it says authored by null. Now, I know some would like to add the word and void on there, but could I check with the chief clerk, is my name on the green jacket?
Representative Howes, the chief clerk, and I have both verified that your name is indeed the author on House File 1738.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does is if someone wants to be detached from a municipality to a town, they file a resolution with the town, with the city. If both entities agree, or within 30 days the town doesn't say anything, or the municipality, then they are neutral. If those things happen, then the administrative law judge can just sign the order for the detachment. They save attorney fees, they save a lot of hassle. So if everyone agrees, the administrative law judge can do it, and it saves everybody a lot of time. I'd appreciate your support.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 1738.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Call the member from Ramsey, Representative Scalzi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Howe's proposal is a consensus bill worked out between the League of Minnesota Cities and the townships. It applies if both the city and the township is in favor, and I urge a green vote.
Discussion to the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed. Its title is agreed to. Next bill on the calendar today is Senate File 1183. The Chief Clerk report the bill, or excuse me, Senate File 1183. The Chief Clerk report the bill.
Senate File 1183, number 13 on the calendar for today, the first engrossment. An act relating to civil law.
Calling the member from St. Louis, Representative Dill, to present your bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Senate File 1183 is about nonprofits that operate under 501c3, C4, and C6 that participate in outdoor recreation projects that are under permit of a state agency, such as the DNR. It would affect snowmobile trails, rollerblade events, any type of outdoor recreation that that the DNR or other public agency as well as a community would authorize. The bill is very important to notice that the stakeholders have all agreed on this, including the Justice Foundation, the trial lawyers, as well the insurance companies and the nonprofits. This would lower the liability, the insurance liability requirements to $1 million from $1.5 million. The reason is the $1 million is at one price, but to buy the next 500,000 requires $1 million additional, and that is at another price substantially higher. And there has never been a lawsuit in the history of these outdoor recreational programs, these small groups that I talked about that are under these permits. There's never been a successful lawsuit brought against them. This bill does not prevent your city. So, for example, if a group, a city, a authorizer of a event were to tell the event, let's say a fishing contest on Leech Lake, where there were many thousands of participants. The authorizing agency or the city or the local unit of government could specify how much liability insurance that they felt was necessary. So they may well have a low amount of $1 million, but the city of Walker, for example, could say no, because of the size and scope of the project, of the event, you would need $10 million. This does not put a cap on it. So I will stand for questions. This bill passed 66-0 in the Senate.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File 1183.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Just wait. Clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is passed. Its title is agreed to. The next bill on the calendar today is House File 389. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 389, number 12 on the calendar for today, the first engrossment, an act relating to local government.
Call the member from Scott, Representative Beard, to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 389 is a bill that's been working its way through the system because it's a rather complicated bill regarding balancing property rights between landowners who want to work and develop their land and the neighbors who have to live with the results of what that could be. It's a tricky balance and one that's been going on here for 150 years, members. And so we worked on this for the last 5 years. The result is the bill you have in front of you today, House File 389 as amended. And I should give kudos to the people that worked so hard and so diligently, people of goodwill and good thought, to get the amended version in front of you that I think is a bill that deserves your support. Basically what we've got going here are three things. Members, in undeveloped areas of the state, there's been in law the ability for somebody to, a unit of government, to throw in what's called a development moratorium. And they can do that for multiple years under existing law. And what we end up with is someone that wants to develop a parcel of property on the industrial park in St. Paul or something like that, which actually is where this bill started from, not out in the rural areas. It started here. This bill what they have is the ability to throw on a moratorium after people have developed their property, developed the plans, played by the rules that exist at the moment, submit their application, and then a local unit of government can throw up their hand and say, boy, we don't like this, we don't understand it, let's put a moratorium on for a year and we will not approve this application. Now, they played by the rules, they've developed according to the comp plan, all the zoning, everything like that, and now they have to face a year. And then we get to the end of the year, and what's happened is the year has been extended to another year. And now pretty soon we've got people that are not only having their property frozen, they're having their capital squandered, and some of them have actually gone out of business. I think there's a better way to do this, and the bill as amended is the one we have in front of you. What we did was we worked very closely with the Association of Metropolitan Counties, League of Minnesota Cities, and the Association of Minnesota Townships. And while they're not wildly enthusiastic about the bill, they were strident in their opposition to the bill originally. And they've said, look, now you've come, you've met our concerns, we can make this work. The moratorium opportunity still exists, members, under the amended version of this bill. A company can bring, a landowner can bring, a developer can bring a completed application. Any unit of government now has 15 days, that's actually an existing law, to review the application, decide whether to approve it or not, or whether they want to publish a public hearing for the purpose of declaring a moratorium. What's changed in the bill and existing law is they only get one 12-month period at the moratorium. If we're going to study an issue and kind of research its ramifications, 12 months seems to me to be a reasonable compromise and the parties that were involved in negotiations agreed. The bill only grandfathers in a complete application for one time period for 12 months, members. There are two other things that are in the bill that are kind of technical in nature, but I'll just touch on them. Development contracts, especially in the suburban areas, members. Development contracts are a popular tool. Rather than going for planned unit developments, they negotiate with the builder, with the developer, and get some things that they'd like in the bill. One of the things that was happening was cities, knowing how much money was tied up in somebody trying to develop a piece of property, were asking for things that weren't in the local comprehensive plan or within the scope of the statutes. This says that that cannot happen absent a two-way agreement, actually a signed document between the builder and the local unit of government. They can still do it, but only in that situation where there is complete and voluntary agreement. Third deals with park dedication fees. This is largely a metropolitan issue, but if you bear with me, I'll tell you what we're doing here. In the last couple years since the land bubble has burst, we have park dedication fees that are established in law according to property values where we were dealing with land at over $100,000 an acre. In Shakopee, for instance, land is now down to $30,000 an acre, but the park dedication fees have not dropped at all. This gives developers that are coming in with new proposals the ability to ask for an independent appraisal to establish the value of new park dedication fees. Members, the use of moratoriums is a legitimate tool for small units of government to use. In Shakopee, which was growing like crazy, I just lost 24,000 citizens in the redistricting because it was growing so fast. We actually instituted a moratorium several years ago, but we did it in this fashion. Every application that was in the pipeline, we kind of put a flag at the end of them and said, we're not taking any more applications until we take 9 months off to catch up with what's going on and to research how things are working out. That way, everyone who'd already played by the rules and put their hard-earned money down actually worked their way through the system as the system was supposed to work. Everybody who hadn't started their application got the moratorium applied to them. That just strikes me as fair. It strikes me as the Minnesota way. Members, this bill, with the exception of allowing for a 75-day window to put a moratorium on still, that was the compromise we reached. This bill, I think, is the Minnesota way. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for a green vote, and I'm prepared to stand for questions if necessary.
Seeing no amendments at the desk, the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 389.
Third reading, discussion of the bill. The member from Hennepin, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would the author of the bill stand for a couple of questions?
He will yield. Representative Nelson.
Representative Beard, I've been getting a lot of emails on this from the beginning of session, and one of the things that they keep asking about is the sand mining down in the southern part of the state, and they're saying that this is a way to get at just to not stop that from going on. Has this anything to do with the sand mining down in Winona?
The member from Scott, Representative Beard.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Nelson, thank you for the question. The bill started 5 years ago before we even talked about, in this case, frac sand mining. That was not the object of the bill. But any development that comes forward, whether it's turkey farming, whether it's a cell phone tower, whether it's sand mining, or any proposed bill like that, the bill would apply to. However, if they're absent zoning or restrictions that are existing in current law, they can do whatever they want with mining. Restrict it, put conditional use permits on it, or whatever. That can happen with this bill or even without this bill. What changes with this bill is that if somebody proposes a mine of any kind, gravel, sand, dirt, for that matter, it still preserves a township or a county's right to apply one-year moratorium on that project if they feel the need to study it.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I got one more question. The other, would the author yield for a question?
Representative from Scott, Representative Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Beard, the other point I keep getting questions, and we heard a little bit about this in committee, had to do with feedlots. The people from the townships and the people in the rural areas, They have a big concern about a bunch of feedlots being able to go around the existing procedures and be forced to get pushed through. And I think we all are concerned about the water and having to live next to one of those. So does this have to, would that stop feedlots from being, from being stopped?
The member from Scott, Representative Beard.
Well, it stopped the feedlot from being stopped. Yes, we have no bananas, Representative Nelson. Let me rephrase your question, I think, to what you meant to ask. If there is a feedlot presented for any place in Minnesota, this process would still apply to that as well. A township, a county could say, whoa, we didn't see this coming. I don't know how they could do that, but it could happen. They could see it coming. They could find this process. They have 75 days to hold the public hearing to say we want an interim ordinance. We want to stop it for 1 year while we study the water issues, the air quality issues, or whatever it pertains to. Yes, this bill would protect that.
Member from Hennepin. The member from Nicollet, Representative Morrow.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, I did send around a piece of information from Land Stewardship Project. Members, I had a chance to talk to some township officers, some folks from my county, and others about what they thought this bill would do. And they all were asking me the same question. What is the problem they're trying to fix? Now, I know Representative Beard described some abstract situations. I'm sure, Representative Beard, you may have some specific examples. But my farmers, and it's often, at least in my area, that farmers are also your township officers. They were asking me at harvest time, now we're given 30 days. We're given 30 days from when the permit, after the permit application is in, then the first public meeting, not public hearing, any public meeting by that unit, be it a township, be it a county, be it a city, to act on a moratorium if they think a moratorium is appropriate for them. To me, members, allowing townships, counties, and cities to determine whether a moratorium is appropriate is the essence of local control. And as I said here on the floor a few years ago, I trust my local township officers, cities, and counties to be reasonable in their exercise of local control. If they think a moratorium is appropriate, I'm sure they went through the work and the dedicated effort to do that. But what I'm worried about, Representative Beard, is you're only giving them 30 days. 30 days. Now, the Senate at least was a little more generous. I think the Senate may be giving 60 days, unless that's been amended. But why 30 days? Then we go to 2/3 majority to enact the moratorium. So if you've got a county with 5 members, 5 commissioners, a county commission, 5 commissioners, you need 4 of the 5 to vote for the moratorium. You don't need a majority, you need a supermajority. And I'm sorry, but I have heard no argument that supports the need for a supermajority to enact a moratorium to give the local community time to understand the permit application and the project that's the subject of the application. Why would we require 4 out of 5? Why would we require an 80% vote? And as Land Stewardship Project notes, for example, this bill, according to this document, moved out of local government by a 9-5 vote. That's not 80%. It couldn't get a supermajority to pass the bill, but the bill is going to require a supermajority of our local counties, cities, or townships. So, Mr. Speaker, I've got other concerns. They're listed here in the document, but my basic question is this. Especially if you represent Greater Minnesota, are you going to go back to your township officers, to your county commissioners, and to your cities and tell them, you know what, we didn't think you were doing the right thing. We're only going to give you 30 days now to act on a permit application, or to enact a moratorium, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Let's make no mistake about it. This bill favors corporate interests over local control. I think that Representative Morrow's point was spot on. To require a supermajority for a county commission or a township board to address a problem in their community, and these are serious issues. We're talking about mining sand for natural gas fracking. This is mining sand in the beautiful bluff country in southeast Minnesota that then gets shipped off to Pennsylvania and Ohio to assist in another environmentally questionable practice of natural gas fracking. And the other point that Representative Morrow made, this is also very much about factory farming as well. And I think there are many counties throughout our state, especially in the southern part of the state, that are dealing with all kinds of water pollution and air problems due to factory farming. And so this is what this bill does. It makes it easier to mine sand for fracking, it makes it easier for factory farming, and it usurps local control. Minnesotans value grassroots democracy. Minnesotans value showing up at their local government, city hall or county board or township hall, and expressing their opinions and taking care of their land and their water that they feel is so important to their livelihood. And that's what this bill takes away. A 2/3 majority required to stop, just on an interim basis, some outside interests coming in and dealing with mining, sand mining, and factory farming. It's absurd. Members, please vote no.
Discussion. The member from Winona, Representative Plowski.
Mr. Speaker and members, I rise today to speak for local control and against House File 389. You've heard some interesting comments today about when this bill was introduced and when the issue was started and what it didn't deal with then and what it deals with now. We live in the here and now, and it's the here and now that this bill impacts. We have several counties that have passed moratoriums. We have regional centers that are working on moratoriums. All of them have contacted us and said they do not support House File 389. It's interesting that in the document that's been passed out, it says in consultation with. It does not say that these organizations support, at this point, House File 389. The counties that have to work with the moratoriums, the cities that have to work with the moratoriums, certainly do not support this bill. It is unfortunate that when we continually bring up support of local control and pay lip service to it, our actions are diametrically opposed to it when a bill like 389 comes along and when the local process is working. You've heard today, what are we changing? We're going to change something that has worked at the county level and is working at the city level. I would hope you would vote for local control and you would vote against House File 389.
Discussion. The member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, Mr. Speaker, would Representative Hornstein yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Cornish.
Representative Hornstein, would you please give me your definition of a factory farm, as you refer to, and how many animal units it would take before you would have to have a permit from the PCA and such and such?
Member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Cornish, I don't have the exact figures at my fingertips, but I think we're talking about very large feedlot operations.
Member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, that's part of the problem when people stand up on the floor and talk about certain things that they have no knowledge of. And I'm not saying that Mr. Hornstein or Representative Hornstein is ignorant in any way. It's just misinformed, and the problem is the system isn't working. Down in the southern part of Faribault County, we had a situation where some outsider and do-gooders came in and they were going to use the same term, factory farm. And what they did is they talked the township board into keeping a feedlot from coming into the area when it was approved, met all the permit regulations that you could, and it was fairly small. And the problem with the terminology of factory farms is you don't have to have very many animal units at all before you have to have a permit from the PCA, and they're highly regulated and environmentally sound. Once in a while you'll hear these horror stories, but just be more careful of how we throw the term factory farm around as compared to a small farm. Thank you.
Member from Swift, Representative Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I cannot express in the strongest terms just how bad of a bill this is. I would urge all of you to vote no. This idea of taking away local control is so absolutely wrong. Coming from a rural district, our rural townships, our counties, they value their control. They value the ability to make decisions. And I really find it to be an assault on the values and the judgment of those rural elected officials when we are letting metro legislators write legislation that's going to affect how they govern themselves. This is very, very bad. I'd like to share a little story with you that's happening in rural Big Stone County. Now, I know rural Big Stone County doesn't look anything at all like Shakopee, which is why we need to have local control. For over 6 years, a company has been working to develop a hard rock mining operation in the Minnesota River Valley. And this is brought to light at a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting I attended for the first time. And within just days, the public outcry against this was immense. There was hundreds of residents that had filled this small Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to go and have their voices heard in opposition to this project. And thankfully, when the time came, Ortonville Township was able to enact a moratorium to go and allow them to more accurately understand the challenges they were facing. One of the biggest concerns were of neighboring residents. They didn't know what would happen when their property, after being adjacent to a hard rock mining and rock crushing operation, was expected to decrease by more than 75% of its value. What were these residents, these citizens, supposed to do when they had invested their life in this home, their property, where they wanted to retire, and suddenly it would be worth maybe 25% of its original value? Thankfully, because the township still had the right to enact a moratorium, they did that. But this whole concept of having to have a 2/3 majority vote to enact a moratorium, it's very undemocratic. We know that many of our township officers, they're volunteers, they're unpaid, they're local people. Sometimes they're people who aren't always able to attend a meeting because of one reason or another. So if one of those township officers was not present, but you had enough members for a quorum, you still wouldn't have been able to enact a moratorium. It doesn't seem very fair. I'd be tempted to ask Representative Beard to yield. I can't ask him how he would vote, but I would be tempted to ask if he thinks that this bill is going to pass with more than a 2/3 majority vote of this body. I highly doubt that to be the case. Which brings us to the point of, why is it fair to require only a simple majority to pass this bill, but passing the burden on to protecting citizens' rights requires a 2/3 majority? This, once again, is questioning the judgment and the decisions of local people. It's a direct assault on local control. I cannot stand for that. It's been mentioned before that the Land Stewardship Project has got serious concerns with this, and they're opposed to this bill. It's also worth noting that the Minnesota Farmers Union is strongly opposed to this bill as well. The current process is working. And we need to remember, too, for all of the sad stories, whether they be inflated or whatever the true facts of them are, of some developer not being able to do something, the reason why is because there has been citizen outcry. There has been public outcry to enact some type of zoning, some type of common sense legislation to protect people's rights. Not to protect corporate rights, not to protect special interests. This is to protect people's rights. We have to remember that. This is citizen-led. This is citizens coming together to stand up, to exercise their own judgment about what type of development, responsible or not, they want in their community. This decision needs to be kept locally. Members, I urge you to vote no.
The member from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I'd just like to build off of what Representative Cornish had said. Representative Hornstein, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. You know that. We've worked on other things as well. And when you said the definition was a large farm or a large farm, I want everybody in the chamber to picture me. That defines myself, if you will. And just because a farm is large doesn't make them a bad producer. And just because they're small doesn't make them a good producer. It comes down to the individual producer. And we could argue the corporate farm law and stuff like that Minnesota has as well. But to label a farm as a factory farm or whatever, I take offense to that, because basically if you use a loose term definition, you're describing myself and the operation that we've been affiliated with. And there are a tremendous amount of great people that are involved in agriculture, from the smallest of the small to the largest of the large here in Minnesota. And it comes back to the individuals and not necessarily the size of the farm. So I would just ask for that. I need a clarification, so if I could ask Representative Beard to yield for a question, please.
He will yield. Representative Hamilton.
Representative Beard, on the language here, you're talking about a moratorium. And is this saying that any moratorium that's placed on in a township has to have a supermajority, or is this for in the event a project is submitted, a permit application is submitted, then the supermajority would kick in if it's in order to block the application per se?
The member from Scott, Representative Beard.
Mr. Speaker, specifically this bill refers to a blocking move, has to be a supermajority. Now, practically speaking, members, I'll point out that most township boards are 3 people. It's a 2-to-1 vote. That's a majority. It's also a supermajority. The only difference is if there's a 5-member board, like most county boards, that has to be 4-to-1. I will point out that in existing Minnesota law, if a governmental entity is going to change a zoning law after the fact, when they're going to change published zoning, that requires a supermajority. Waiving zoning for conditional use for something that wasn't originally in a comp plan requires a supermajority, because it presupposes that it got to rise to a higher level. If you're going to have somebody playing by the rules with their property and you're going to change the rules in the middle of the game, it requires a supermajority. Practically speaking, though, Representative Hansen, a 2-to-1 vote is a supermajority on a 3-person board.
Representative from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that explanation. One of my jobs, roles and responsibilities in the private sector life, it was my job to actually go out and permit these sites. And I've been doing this for over 15 years. And I appreciate the process. I appreciate the public hearings and going out there and answering the questions. And I was also experienced where a moratorium was put in place to block certain projects. What I'm trying to convey here as well is that we, the larger farmers, if you will, large farms in Minnesota, have been around for decades. 10, 20 years, whether you're looking at 500, 1,000, or 2,000 animal units, they've been around for a long time. And it has given local units of government ample amounts of time in order to address this, if you will, as well. And so I understand how this is being used in the past to block certain projects. But thank you once again for the clarification. I have the utmost respect for my friends, Representative Hornstein and others, and I just want to say, just because you're large doesn't make you a bad farmer, and just because you're small doesn't make you a good farmer. It comes back to the individual. Thank you.
Discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if Representative Beard would yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Winkler.
Representative Beard, I actually was interested in Representative Hamilton's question, and I wasn't sure if we actually got an answer to it. I think maybe there was a miscommunication. Maybe I didn't understand it. I thought he was asking if you always needed a 2/3 vote to enact a moratorium, an interim ordinance.
The member from Scott, Representative Beard.
If there is no application pending and there wants to be a moratorium on, and it's a 2-to-1 or a 3-member board, 2-to-1 is a supermajority. Whether or not it requires supermajority on a 5-member board with no applications pending, I don't think so. If they're going to do zoning changes with appropriate, and this is now, I'm going to tell you, I'm a little out of my depth on this one because this wasn't part of my cram course on this bill over the last 3 months. But if we got a zoning situation we want to change, if we want to contemplate new uses and change our comp plan, I believe that's a simple majority on the board. After you do the appropriate public notice, hold the public hearings, and go ahead with your discussion. Moratoriums can be imposed by city councils, counties, and townships, I guess, where in lieu of county governance, but counties usually, Representative Winkler, counties usually have the overarching land use planning for their townships in most of Minnesota. At least it does in Scott County. And beyond that, I can't speak to that any more expertly than that, except moratoriums can be imposed any time outside of this bill. This only deals with when there is someone who's played by the rules, paid their money, did the application, and now we want to change it in the middle of the game. That's what House File 389 is about, not about other land use planning that we may want to change in absent a pending application.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I mean, Representative Beard, the focus of the discussion has been on townships and counties, but as far as I can tell, this interim ordinance change would apply to all cities as well, and of course the vast majority of the population of the state lives in cities, one form or another, so we're not talking about three-member city councils, and I do think that two-thirds vote is a problem. You know, and I have to commend you and the others that you've worked with on this bill, that you've tried to be pretty accommodating and pretty reasonable and looking for a solution. But it's, as we said when this bill last left GovOps, I think this is a Goldilocks kind of bill. It has to be just right, or we shouldn't do it. And the two issues that we raised were this two-thirds vote requirement and the fact that you can have too little public notice. There can be a lack of time for the public to become aware of this issue and get organized and create an issue with their city council. So I don't know if you think this bill is going to pass the House and there'll be a concurrence in the Senate or the same language, or if there's a conference committee coming up or what. But I do hope that you will remain open to addressing this concern about a two-thirds vote, and also remain open to addressing this question of the amount of public notice required, because I do think there's a point that if a landowner has started an application process and have followed the rules, I think there's a point that they should have some consideration for that before an interim ordinance is adopted. At the same time, not every possible use is anticipated in a zoning ordinance, and so local communities, local citizens should have the ability to react to a proposal that wasn't previously seen. I don't think your bill is there yet. I do, and I'm not going to vote for it. I would ask our members not to vote for it. I suspect it'll pass, and when it comes back, I hope it's a bill that we can get more bipartisan or stronger bipartisan support for, because I do think there's some merit here, but I just don't think it's there. So I guess I'll ask Representative Beard to yield to one more question.
He will yield. The member from Hennepin, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Beard, are you willing to consider further discussion, further amendments, further change to your bill to clarify the two-thirds vote issue, and to make sure that, and to actually seek to get a bill with broader consensus?
The member from Scott, Representative Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Winkler and members, yes. There was a conference committee. This bill is not the exact duplicate of the one that's passing the Senate. I'm not sure if it's already passed or if it's on the general orders, I think they call it there. But this bill is different, and that's by design, because there's a little work yet to do, I think, and I wanted to stay open for that possibility. But yes, thank you for the question.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Winkler.
Well, so, Mr. Speaker, just to repeat, I do think this bill should have a red vote. I don't think it's ready. I don't think we should do our work in conference. I think we should do our work in committee. But I'd urge a red vote, but I do think there's some possibility that in the end we could have broader and stronger support for this. And we've had some bills that have come through this session that have been narrowly partisan, and I hope will get vetoed. And we've had other bills that have been based on common sense reform and bipartisan committee work, and I hope this becomes one of the latter.
The member from Scott, Representative Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this has been good discussion today. Some of it I would just like to comment on here just in closing. The supermajority vote is one that's, I understand we're trying to balance property rights against a community's interest in what happens on someone else's property. It's probably no surprise that I tend to default to private property ownership, because that is what has made this country great. One of the basic tenets and values of this country is the ability to have and hold private property. That needs to be protected against whims and vagaries and uncertainty. That's what House File 389 is intended to do. We're trying to find that balancing act and correct some of the what I see to be probably misapplications of moratorium going forward. To be clear, the work that's been done to this point, members, in effect, Representative Morrow's comment actually yields a 75-day window in this bill. The Senate bill, I understand, is 30 days longer than that. This bill, though, in effect is 75 days to consider a permit, call the public hearings, and decide whether or not you want to have a 12-month moratorium. But, Mr. Speaker, perhaps at this time it's best if we continue this bill, and we'll come back and visit this another day. I think there's a little bit more work I need to do to talk to some folks, and I don't know if we want to end up recalling it to committee or if we want to take another run at it another day. But with that, I'd ask the body's indulgence that we continue House File 389 on the calendar.
Representative Beard moves that House File 389 be continued. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Representative Dean.
Mr. Speaker, I move the calendar of the day be continued.
Representative Dean moves that the calendar of the day be continued. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Announcements by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the following change in membership of the Conference Committee on House File 1870. Delete the name of Kelly and add the name of Erickson.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions on the House desk and online. If there are no objections, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail.
Drazkowski moves that House File 2232 be recalled from the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform and re-referred to the Committee on Transportation, Policy, and Finance.
In the interim, I call on the member from Olmsted, Representative Benson. For what purpose do you rise?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, it's my pleasure to let everybody know that Representative Randy Dettmer is among us today. And, Mr. Speaker, that at 5 until 7 o'clock at the Wellstone Center, just offers Cesar Chavez, Rochester at the Capitol Day. So please turn out if you can.
Motions and resolutions. A member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, House File number 2232 no longer, or actually the language that's in the bill that applies to the HHS Reform Committee has already been heard in the committee. I have the okay from the chair of both that committee and the Transportation Committee to transfer it over there, and also talk to Representative Liebling about it. So appreciate your support for the motion.
Discussion of the motion. The member from Hennepin. Nope. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the Drazkowski motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
Gruenhagen moves that House File 2346 be recalled from the Committee on Health, Human Services Reform and re-referred to the Committee on Civil Law.
Call the member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaker, I've talked to the committee chairs, and it's a bill that House File 2346 deals with specifying financial responsibility or liability for hospital-acquired infections, and it's more appropriately heard in the Committee of Civil Law. Thank you.
Discussion to the motion. Member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we've had some discussion with Representative Gottwalt, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the commitment is here that afterwards we'd take another look, and it may need to come back to Health and Human Service Reform, because I actually think that it really does need to be heard there. So maybe, actually, if Representative Gottwalt would yield.
He will yield. Representative Liebling.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Gottwalt, is that kind of the understanding that we can bring it back to your committee afterwards?
Member from Stearns, Representative Gottwalt.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Liebling, I think we talked about if it makes sense for us to walk it back to our committee, I think we could, but it deals specifically with an area of civil law, and that's why we think it needs to go to that committee. But I think if there's a strong interest in bringing it back to our committee, I would be open to that, yes.
Further discussion to the motion. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Announcements. A member from Hennepin, Representative Kahn.
Yes. Mr. Speaker and members, I want to announce two
interesting meetings that are going on discussing the future of women in Afghanistan from a Professor Courtwright, who is a specialty on Afghan women. There is one meeting Friday, March 9th from 6:30 and then going on to 7 at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. There's, Dr. Courtwright is also going to be meeting with interested legislators tomorrow morning at 10 in the State Office Building cafeteria. And I'll send, I'll send a notice to everybody when I get back to my real computer upstairs. Bye.
Announcements. The member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just want to add my invitation for Rochester on Tour, and each of you has on your desk a little ticket, and this is for the trolley that's going to leave from in front of the State Office Building here. And I want you to know that you don't need the ticket. This is a souvenir ticket. So please do come and hop on the trolley and get a ride over to the Wellstone Center. It's only $5, and I know people have always enjoyed it when we've had these. In the past years, it was at the Armory. We're a little further away, but hope you'll come and join us. Thanks.
Call the member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to announce that the Government Operations and Elections Committee will meet at 4:45 in room 10.
The member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Education Finance Committee will be meeting at 5 p.m. in room 200. 5 p.m., room 200 for Education Finance. Thank you.
The member from Dakota, Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Environment Committee will meet at 4:45. We're a little quicker, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Out of deference to the Rochester delegation and hoping that all of you can attend their event, education policy reform will not resume until 6:30 in the basement. 6:30 in the basement.
Announcements. Member from Hennepin, the minority leader, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted just to get a little guidance on where a couple of important bills are going to be moving in the next week or two. You know, today in the House, we're seeing a lot of discussion about constitutional amendments. In the Senate, they had a long debate on constitutional amendments. We really haven't seen a specific jobs bill hit the House floor yet. And I see Representative Howes nor Representative Scott are on the floor. I was just wondering what the plan was on the bonding bill, when that might start to be assembled. I think now that we have the holdup the last time we talked, I think, was we were waiting for the forecast to come out. That's been out for a week. I just wonder when we're going to actually start seeing some movement on the bonding bill, that we can get folks back to work. Maybe, since they're not here, Majority Leader Dean would yield on that.
Representative Dean will yield. Member from Washington, Representative Dean.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Thiessen. We have passed quite a few jobs bills. I know that they are not all jobs bills in the way that you might think about them, and where you borrow money from the taxpayers and spend it. But they are in fact jobs bills, and we've been passing them. We'll continue to pass them, and we'll be continuing to ask for your support on them. With respect to the bonding bill, Representative Howes has been working through this process and is trying to be very diligent about that and getting input, and I know that he's continuing to work on that, and we'll continue to look for recommendations and from your side of the aisle as well. But I think that he will be constructing a jobs bill that you like, which is a bonding bill. We are focused more on reform, and will continue to be focused on reform. We did pass a bonding bill, if you remember, in July at almost $500 million that was aimed at putting people back to work with some good infrastructure projects to get folks in the construction trades busy across the state of Minnesota. We would encourage that as well.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you know, one of the reasons I'm getting concerned is that we're hearing we're going to be getting out of here mid-April. We have a 10-day vacation planned at the beginning part of April. The time is slipping away to get this work done. Representative Gunther was generous enough to hear a number of our specific DFL jobs bills. I hope that they move out of Representative Gunther's committee and they can actually get to the floor that'll get people to work right away. I'm not sure that there should be a lot of, I guess from my perspective on this issue of borrowing money, I think borrowing money to invest in long-term infrastructure like our colleges and college buildings, our roads and bridges, those types of things are things that actually make a lot of sense, not just to get people back to work, which they clearly will do, but also to build a long-term prosperity for the state. What I don't think is a good idea is borrowing one-time money like the tobacco bonds that you all proposed and voted for on one-time spending. So I'm not sure that you are in any really position to be arguing about whether we ought to be borrowing money to do long-term investments like Minnesotans all across the state do when they buy their house. But running up the credit card to pay for one-time spending to so-called balance our budget, that is a significant problem. So I look forward to seeing the bonding bill moving much more quickly now that we know we have maybe 4 weeks left to go here in this session. And I hope that we actually get some other jobs bills through the session in the next coming weeks that will get people to work today and close that gap today. Thanks.
The member from Martin, Representative Gunther.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Thiessen yield?
He will yield. Representative Gunther.
Representative Thiessen, we did hear the Small Business Caucus bills, and they came with many good ideas, 2 of them which were tax reductions. They eliminated, gave tax credits. They weren't from my side of the aisle, by the way. But I totally applauded them, and their thoughtfulness and the way that group worked together was just phenomenal. As far as the bonding bill is concerned, from previous bonding bills, from the last $1 billion bonding bill, the biennium before this, we still have $650 million outstanding that is not, the bonds have not been let. I don't know how anyone can give us any confidence and security in knowing that they're going to be any better this time. I know you call that a jobs bill, I call that a borrowing bill. There's a difference of opinion. When it's spent, it is a jobs bill. I look at, as far as the bills that we've heard, the only ones that has a chance of bringing in new business to Minnesota and creating new jobs, which we desperately need to do, is the bill that I call Profit, and that happens to be endorsed by the Hennepin County EDA and the Ramsey County EDA and the Port Authority in St. Paul, and I think Harry Melander even likes it. That will truly create jobs, and it's something that I'm looking forward to having passed with your help. I think it's something that is a fair, balanced bill. We took all the hocus pocus out of it, and I think it's something that we can all hang our heads, hang up and say, this is what we did to create jobs, because it does have that immediate effect. And 70% of the building is done where you live, not where I live. And I want to address that 70%. But I also look at other things. You know, we have to concentrate on eliminating barriers to growth and jobs. We have to give the employers some assurance that they'll know what the next person they hire will cost. I talk to employers over and over. They tell me what this guy's going to cost that you want me to hire, Gunther. And I can't do it. There's too many unknowns. So let's start making all those unknowns come to light, and we will have more people hired than we've ever dreamed of having. I really believe that. Minnesota is getting less unemployment all the time. However, there's a whole host of people, like Representative Surdich used to say, that are hidden. Their time has been gone. They're not drawing unemployment. They are not a statistic anymore. They have 2 part-time jobs, so they aren't part of, they don't feel they have one. Work with me, and we'll get rid of those people.
Announcements. The member from Hennepin, the Minority Leader, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Gunter, that's the point. Let's actually get those bills, let's get bills to the floor and vote on them instead of wasting time on constitutional amendments. That's what the people of Minnesota want us to do, but that's not your caucus's priority. So you made my point, and I appreciate that. Thanks.
Announcements. Seeing no further announcements, a member from Washington, Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3 p.m. Monday, March 12th, 2012.
Representative Dean moves that when the House adjourns today, adjourns until 3 p.m. Monday, March 12, 2012. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Member from Washington, the Majority Leader, Representative Dean.
I move the House do now adjourn.
Representative Dean moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 3 p.m. Monday, March 12, 2012.